Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. Today I've got a video on craft. Today I'm going to be talking about symbolism. So before I get into the actual video, I want to quickly say everyone has been requesting that I make videos on craft again. I've been getting so many messages asking when I'm going to talk about craft again. I miss when you used to talk about craft, and I also miss when I used to talk about craft. I've been feeling a little lost with what topics I should cover. I feel like I covered a lot of the main ones that I'd wanted to talk about, and now I'm like, I don't know what to talk about. I want to try to make more craft related videos. You guys keep requesting them, so I want to make what you guys are interested in seeing. So if you have specific topics that you want me to cover, let me know, because I feel like I need a little bit of direction and guidance so I can actually plan and make some videos that you guys want to see in terms of writing craft. So today I wanted to talk about symbolism. Symbolism is something that always trips me up when I'm trying to explain it or when I'm trying to describe how to do it, because it's one of those very delicate, lofty things. It's one of those things that kind of finds itself in that undercurrent of a story. It's like these very fine threads, you know, it can be a little difficult to articulate how it's done. But I do have a few things that I wanted to touch on in this video. So if you don't know what a symbol is essentially something in the story that represents something else. You can kind of think of it as one half of a metaphor. We're being presented one half of that metaphor and the rest has to be inferred. Now, symbolism is often seen as the secret to depth. And I want to dispel that right away. Symbolism is great and it's important, and I don't want to say that you shouldn't have symbolism in your work, because symbolism can add a lot of texture to a piece. Symbolism alone is not where depth is found. Depth is in character, and if you have complex characters, your story will have depth. Symbolism can add richness to the elements of a story. They can add weight because they give elements of the story and the story's world meaning. I think we've all heard the kind of classic, example about how people often read into symbolism too much. We've all heard this classic story where, an English teacher says that the curtains are blue because the character is sad, when in reality the author had just made the curtains blue because the author wanted the curtains to be blue. This would be an example of kind of a weak symbol, because the curtains simply just existing there, being blue, probably don't mean anything. So yeah, this English teacher in this story, not a real person, probably doesn't really have any ground to say that the curtains mean anything, because the curtains aren't doing anything meaningful within the story. However, if the main character were to have meaningful interactions with the curtains, and the color blue was integrated into the story in a meaningful way, in a way that had weight, in a way that had change, then there would be fairly reasonable ground to say that maybe, yeah, the curtains do represent the main character's sadness. If the curtains are just simply there in a static way, it's probably not a symbol, or at least not a very effective one. Simply a static object existing in the world isn't a very strong symbol. Symbolism needs to move with the character, and I think a good way to see this is to think about it as a symbol needs to articulate something about the character or the story that the character can't articulate themselves. I said it's like a metaphor. You're threading that metaphor through the story. The curtains simply being there on their own, they don't say anything about the character, they don't reveal anything about the story, so saying that they represent that the character is sad is extremely thin and it's kind of meaningless, It's like I could pick up literally any object in my surrounding and say oh, this represents this in my life, but it probably doesn't, because it's just a static object. What I'm getting at is that the object needs to have movement throughout the story that mirrors the movement of whatever it represents in order for it to really act as a symbol. A lot of the times we see this movement in terms of relationships. So say in the story you have a tree, and the tree is a symbol for the main character's sister. If the tree is just there, we don't really have any grounds to say that it's a symbol for the sister. The main character's relationship with the tree to mirror her relationship with her sister. So she feels a similar way about the tree as she feels about her sister, and those relationships evolve together. So for example, let's say the story starts where her relationship with her sister is vibrant, they're close, and then at the start of the story something happens that fractures them and they start to move away from each other. Maybe her sister had been a very protective person, someone she felt safe around, and someone she kind of went to for comfort or shelter. But that starts to disintegrate as the story goes on, and maybe in the middle of the story, near the deepest, darkest moments of the story, she feels the opposite of that. She doesn't feel she has any relationship or closeness. That feeling of protection she had from her sister is gone. So if the tree is just there, not doing anything, nothing changes, we would have no reason to tie these two things together. But if the tree, maybe at the beginning of the story, is a place that the main character goes and she sits under this tree and the leaves shelter her from the sun, she feels comfort. Just like how she feels when she's with her sister. And then deeper and deeper into the story, you know, maybe the tree starts to die or just all the leaves fall away, and suddenly the place that she used to go where she felt comfort, this tree, now doesn't provide what it used to provide to her, which was comfort or safety. Now the leaves aren't there to shelter her from the elements. Now this has become a symbol. The two elements of the symbol have kind of had the same relationship development. This can even become a great way to show the main character's goal. You know, the main character wants to repair her relationship with her sister, just like she might want to save this dying tree. This is a fairly heavy-handed symbol, I will say. It's not exactly subtle, but for the sake of this example, I think that it makes sense. The two things kind of have to move together. They have to develop together. The thing about symbolism is that you do have to be careful with symbolism, because if it becomes too heavy-handed, it can really feel like just an attempt from the author to make the story deeper. It can become a little like wink wink. It's like the author is kind of sitting there like tapping you on the shoulder going like, hey, did you see that symbol? Like that's a symbol. Did you see my symbol? That's something that you want to avoid. So now that we've kind of established like what a symbol is and what it might look like in a story, I want to cover a few of what I consider to be traits of a strong symbol. There are different ways to approach symbolism in your writing and different things that it can accomplish, but from my personal stance, these are traits of effective symbols. So the first one is that the symbol shows something within the subtext of the narrative that can't be articulated otherwise. If a symbol is showing something that is already clear and already articulated without the symbol, we don't need the symbol. The symbol isn't adding anything. This is a great rule of thumb with characters. If the character understands this idea or this relationship, whatever it is the symbol is standing in for, then you probably don't need the symbol. Symbols are effective when they're there because they're showing something that the main character can't articulate themselves. Now, this one might just be personal opinion, but I personally think that symbols should be unique to the story. Now, there are cases where you might want to use symbols that are like established in like the literary canon, for example, doves representing peace. But in my opinion, symbols are, for the most part, stronger when they are unique to the story. The object, the symbol, has gained its importance and gained meaning because of the interactions and the movement it has within the story, not because it came in with symbolic meaning. Personally, I think that that's much stronger symbolism. It's specific, it's interesting, and it's not so obvious and heavy-handed. There are always exceptions and places where you'll want to use established literary symbols, but for the most part, I do think they should be unique to the piece. Like I just talked about, symbols should not be static. If a symbol itself is static, or if it's representing a static trait. Let's say you have a symbol for one of your main character's flaws. Let's say your main character is really selfish, and you've established that like this lamp in his house is a symbol for his character flaw. If neither of those things change, it's a pretty weak symbol. So if he never really develops, if that character trait never develops into something more meaningful in the story, and the lamp just remains a lamp that's just sitting there consistently representing the fact that he is selfish, it's not really saying anything, it's not really articulating anything, it's kind of just a stand-in for something that we could already observe ourselves. We can just see that he's selfish. Why do we need a lamp to tell us that he's selfish or represent that he's selfish? But if he's selfish and that's going to develop in a significant way, and the symbol is going to move along with that, then that can be really interesting and it can be really powerful. I also think it's important with a symbol that the narrative itself should never comment on the symbol. If the main character starts commenting on the symbolic importance or the narrative meaning of a symbol, it becomes really melodramatic and it loses all of its subtlety. A symbol really is something that shouldn't be commented on, because when you think about it, it's not necessarily a realistic device. We're not all going through life with these inanimate objects representing us. As soon as the main character starts to comment on it, in my opinion, it becomes very melodramatic, and it just kind of dissolves all of the subtlety that you've worked to build up. And finally, I think that a symbol should represent a character or a relationship or a character trait, something related to character, and not a larger idea. Let's say that you want to bring in something as a symbol for death. Having a symbol that just represents death on its own isn't very complex, because the idea on its own isn't really going to change or evolve whatsoever. So you just have a stand-in for this idea, and it can be kind of lofty when you just have an idea represented by something and that's it. Rather, you need to make it more specific to the situation. So for example, instead of having a symbol representing death, that symbol could represent the main character's fear of death. Because this is representing something specific to the character, therefore specific to the story, therefore it has the chance to actually evolve and have meaning within the story. So that said, now you might be saying, Shaylin, alright, these things make good symbols. These are some qualities of good symbols. How do I actually add one to my story? I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound a little weird. You don't. This might be a slightly controversial take. The thing about symbolism is that it is so easy to make it heavy-handed. It is so easy to make it super obvious, too heavy-handed, and just not subtle at all. So what I would recommend would be to write your first draft not really paying attention to the story. Now, for a short story, you can probably write the full thing and not really pay attention to the symbolism. For a novel, you might start to pick up on these things while you write, but like, you don't need to go into a novel knowing specifically what the symbols are going to be. Here's the thing about symbolism. It's kind of like theme in that it's hard to write a piece that doesn't have it, intentional or not. Even unintentionally, it's very hard to not have a symbol. So this is what I'd recommend doing. My point isn't don't integrate symbolism. It's actually one of the few things where I think it's a bit better to integrate it after the first draft. So write your first draft, and once you're done, then you go back and you look through and you see which objects or places have started to gather meaning through their interactions with the main character. Because the thing is, there are going to be objects within the world that the main character starts to have meaningful interactions with. Those things are probably your symbols, but it can be very hard to plan for those things. It can be super hard to set out knowing that you want the window to be a symbol and actually integrate that. But if you just write your story, and then once you go back, you're reading over and you go, okay, this window seems really important. The main character has a couple meaningful interactions with this window. I think this window is a symbol. This way, it's very natural. It's incorporated itself very naturally. Then what you kind of have to do is just like find that thread and just kind of tug it out a little bit. In your revisions, go back, find the meaning, find the symbols, and then just gently, gently bring them out. Very carefully. Just lift those symbols up a tiny bit. And kind of the way that you do that is, so you've established that, okay, I think this window is a symbol because the character has had these meaningful interactions with it. What do you think it represents? And then what you have to do is just make sure that every single time the window appears in the story is in line with the development you want that symbol to have. Symbolism is, of course, a pretty dense topic, so I could definitely keep talking about this. Like, there's more to say, but I just wanted to, this is like my little 2 cents on what I think makes a good symbol. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr, and I'll see you next time. Bye.